Welcome back to Conversations on Deck, and today is Manager Monday, folks. And on Mondays, I like to feature a manager, kind of the unsung heroes of Major League Baseball. You know, not every year has a manager card, but there's several years where Tops and, Fleer and Don Russ will print out manager cards. I've always been drawn to them. I'm kind of like a manager. I'm a principal at a K-12 school, and I've been in the trenches as a teacher, and now I'm in the trenches as a principal or a manager. So this is 1987 Topps Dick Williams card. The 87 Topps. I think it's kind of cool. It has that wood grain, on the front. It's kind of reminiscent of those 62 cards. I remember, some of my older brothers collected cards, and I kind of inherited those cards. And I remember a Sandy Koufax, 62 Sandy Koufax card, and that's what these 87s remind me of that wood grain on the back. There's a checklist, and we all remember seeing those checklists as kids, and you didn't know about it at the time, but you would actually use those checklists with a pen, try to fill it in, or put a check mark or an X or something like that. Nowadays, we're like, oh no, I can't believe I did that. Anyways, but that also the 87, I love the Mariners uniform. Love the colors. Love the trident on the hat. That I think is iconic. I love seeing that. And the royal blue and yellow. That was kind of their style for their uniforms when they started in 77. Kind of went through 92. And then, teams start changing the colors. And now you just never know what kind of colors, teams are going to have on their uniforms. But anyways, love those 87 cards. So, Dick Williams, let's talk a little bit about him. He was born May 7th, 1929, St. Louis, Missouri, and we know St. Louis, that's a great baseball town. He died July 7th, 2011. He was a player himself in the major leagues. He played in the outfield, he played in the infield a little bit. He became a coach at an early age, became a manager, managed the Red Sox, my favorite team. The Red Sox in 66 were like in last place. Well, in 67, the impossible dream season under Dick Williams, man, they went all the way to the World Series. And then they lost, but Dick Williams later in the early 70s with the 72 and 73 A's, he was World Series champ with those teams. So that was kind of cool. When I was a teacher, one of the things I loved to share with the kids were famous quotes or quotes by people. So I've got this book here called Baseball Chronicles, an oral history of baseball through the decades from Mike Blake. I want to give him the credit. And here's just kind of what Tony Gwynn said about Dick Williams. All through the years, the reason I made the ball club was that I tried to do the little subtle things to help us win. My former manager, Dick Williams, who was the best baseball manager I've ever had, used to talk baseball to me, talk about fundamentals, and he drilled it into me. One day in 1982, he even said to the team, quote, just because Tony G is there backing you up doesn't mean you don't have to make that play, end quote. That he appreciated me doing the little things just kept me working even harder to be there whenever I had to. Wow, could you imagine? That's the great Tony Gwynn just said that about you as a manager. I think that is absolutely phenomenal. And, Tony Gwynn, spoke about it a little bit there, that his style, okay? Dick Williams, man, he was a tough love kind of guy. If he didn't like you, especially if you were a pitcher and he didn't like you, ask Mark Langston. You knew it. You knew it. He was not a guy who was known to smile. He wasn't going to be laughing and yucking it up with the guys, but he did love his players, and he was willing to fight for his players on the field. He got 6 ejections for 3 years with the Mariners. He was actually 18th on the all-time list with 57 ejections. But as Tony Gwynn said, or kind of it insinuated, if he liked you, then he was going to invest his time and he's going to develop those areas where he saw strengths. Not just Tony Gwynn. You could ask Harold Reynolds. Um, Harold Reynolds was one of those young players that came up when Dick Williams was there, and he would kind of say, hey, you know what? Dick Williams is one kind of laid the foundation for the Mariners, especially in the early 90s. Okay. Yeah. Also, with Dick Williams, I'd say this his tough style when he came in with the Boston Red Sox, he instituted a lot of rules, curfews, fines. He even took the captaincy away from the great Carl Yastrzemski. And you can imagine how that went over with Yaz and the other players. And here's what Dick Williams said about that. Quote, there's only one chief, and that is me. Everybody else is the Indians. End quote. Well, guess what, folks? They were in last place in 66. In 67, the impossible dream, they went to the World Series. They took the Cardinals to Game 7, and they lost. And yeah, that's definitely kind of a bummer. So the 87 Mariners, what'd they look like? Well, they were fourth in the AL West. They had a 78 and 84 record. Here are some of the guys that he managed. Scott Bradley at catcher, Alvin Davis at first, Harold Reynolds, who I just mentioned, at second base. Harold was an all-star that year, led the AL with 60 stolen bases, led the AL with being caught 20 times. But again, you can't steal a base if you don't try, and that means you're going to get caught a bunch. But you're probably, if you like Harold Reynolds, you're going to steal a lot of second and third base. Ray Keown is at shortstop. Jim Presley at third, not related to Elvis Presley. Phil Bradley, not Bill Bradley's brother, at left field. John Moses, center field. Mike Kingery in right. Ken Phelps is DH. And a young 24-year-old Edgar Martinez was on the team. Didn't play that much, just 13 games, but we know Edgar Martinez ended up becoming a Hall of Famer. Mark Langston was his top pitcher. He had a 5.9 WAR, 19 and 13 record. Led the AL with 262 Ks. He was an all-star, Gold Glover. And Ed Nunez was the closer. He had a 3 and 4 record. He had 12 saves. And yeah, so that was the 87 Mariners, okay? Dick was there from 86, 87, and then he got fired in 88. But here's a famous quote that Dick Williams said while he was the manager of the Mariners, and it just got me thinking. Quote, I don't want to mellow. I'd rather be known as a winner and a poor loser. End quote. That tells you how competitive Dick Williams was. And, that made me, being a history guy, that made me think about, you want to be a winner and a poor loser. I don't know. I don't want to be thought of as a poor loser as a principal. I don't want to be thought of as a poor loser as a husband or a dad or as a friend. I was thinking about, back in history, 1532, Niccolo Machiavelli, he wrote that treatise, The Prince, and that was kind of like his commentary on leadership for upcoming princes. And that's kind of what the Dick Williams quote reminds me of. And here's what Machiavelli said, and most people have heard this if they took a history class and paid attention. Quote, a question arises whether it be better to be loved than feared or feared than loved. It may be answered that one should wish to be both, but because it's difficult to unite them in one person, it is much safer to be feared than loved, when of the two, either must be dispensed with. End quote. Basically, he's saying you got to pick one. You got to either be loved or feared. Well, I will tell you this, folks. I've been a teacher / principal for a little over 30 years now. I've been in public school and private school. You know what? I can balance that a little bit. There are some times where I need to be feared as the principal. But you know what? I want to be loved. I want to love the people I work with, the people I manage, and I want to love the students. I want to love the parents. And you know what? We don't have time in this world to be worried about power and worry about striking fear in people. Instead, hey, let's work hard so we can be a winner like Dick Williams said, but let's work hard with the mindset of serving other people. I think those are the best managers. I think those are the best uh, spouses. I think those are the best parents. I think those are the best friends. I think those are the best leaders, servant leaders. Oh, where did I get that? Well, that's what Jesus was and is, a servant leader, folks. So I hope you enjoyed this Manager Monday, and I hope you have a great day.